In the following programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Rogers nor Rogers TV.
Hi, and welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests today are Mayor Andrea Matrosovs and Deputy Mayor Peter Bordignon of the town of Blue Mountains. And we've had them on before, and we've had some delightful conversations about things in the east side of Grey County. And welcome back, both of you. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, I was going to... I had a great time reading the newspapers and reading the minutes of what's been going on in the town of Blue Mountains. And it's, in some ways, you are cutting edge. You're on the edge, on the leading edge of some really interesting things that are happening, not just in your community, but across Ontario. And I guess the big one is short-term accommodations. Peter, you, I'm told, are the go-to guy for this issue. And the mayor's nodding in agreement, so it's obvious. It's your floor. Oops, we got you muted there, Peter.
Sorry, when the mayor gives her nod, that's sort of a time to keep the file open and keep going. No, what so as you know, town of Blue Mountains, it's been since 2008, really, when some OMB hearings came through at the time, and the laws came into place, with much evolution since 2008, with the biggest update coming about a year and a half ago, which we worked on from when the mayor and I were on the last term of council. So yeah, I've sort of become an expert in that, starting from the ratepayers right in through into council. But we're getting very close to hopefully having the best summer for all this coming summer of 2023 for both visitors, residents, and operators.
Why would you say that? Best summer. That's a pretty big, I wouldn't say a promise, but a pretty big statement.
I say that because I believe the bylaw is working. My phone rings a lot less on a Saturday night from angered neighbors, and my complaints in from the STA Association about how we're putting our thumb on top of them. Those emails and calls are a little bit less as well. What we've done is we've taken roundtables over the past probably 4 years with all stakeholders, from OPP to the operators to the neighbors to the ratepayers associations, and they've come up with sort of guidelines they want to see for these STAs, including a renter's code of conduct, which a lot of people are adhering by. No hot tubs after 11, no use of fire pits, things like that, just to make the quiet enjoyment of everybody involved. And I honestly think too that the STA operators are quantifying and qualifying the renters a little bit better, so we're not getting the when I cut my teeth in Blue Mountain, my older brother's chalet, it was like the Wild West out there, sneaking into Jozo's and things like that, and 40 people on somebody's lawn. I think we're not seeing that anymore, and that's a bonus for everybody involved. The owners have a much better business to run smoothly, and they were the ones that didn't want any rules. They're the ones that didn't want any bylaws, and now they welcome them. They just had their first AGM as an association about a month ago. I was one of the speakers, and the rules are very well received. They don't want any trouble. We have fire inspection, we have bylaw, parking, things like that, and the neighbors seem to be happier. So all in all, that's why I'm looking forward to a good summer.
Well, when we get you back in the fall, we'll have your report.
I hope I'm still smiling at that point, definitely.
That's right. And it's also an initiative on the other side of it too, because Peter's described very well those who are legal STAs that are conforming to the rules, because they were at the table to help craft those rules. So there really is a shared ownership. And that also means that they're as interested as we as the town and our community members are to make sure that we can actually control the ones that are flying under the radar that are not actually legally registered to operate as an STA here. So combing the Airbnb ads, looking for the license numbers, those kinds of things are cooperative. It's working. our eyes are on it, because we really have to be, because otherwise those who are not following, those who don't have a license then might then end up being the ones where the complaints are based, because they're not following rules. So that's the serious nature of it as well, is that it's not possible just to do it until you're discovered, because do that and you'll never be eligible for a license.
That's if I could pick up on something, David, on that, sorry, that the mayor just said, is by putting those tools in the toolbox of our bylaw department, we've been able to find people not just for being caught renting, but being caught advertising as well, through the AMPS penalties, the administrative monetary penalties. So we don't have to go under the Provincial Offences Act anymore. We can do it right here with our own bylaw. And another thing that we find quite interesting is, in the very first report from bylaw to us, out of the 120 odd charges relating to STAs, 113 of them were for illegal STAs. The rest were from licensed properties. So that shows you the large percentage of people that we're going at, not just going after, but where the problems are stemming from. The mayor said it best, it's from the illegal STAs, definitely.
Sure. Now, you've been asked to do some presentations, I understand, Peter, at municipal conferences about your work on STAs. How has that been received?
Actually,
It was our CAO, Sean Everett, was the one who just recently presented and will be again presenting in August. So he was one of the panelists that were invited to the Ontario Small Urban Municipalities Conference just last month in April. And I can tell you, when I was observing through the room, people were scrambling to take notes. They did not want him to stop talking, because we have had a chance, as Peter said, since 2008, we've been looking at this issue long before Airbnb became prolific. And now there are places like Prince Edward County and other just about every municipality is starting to be touched, where there's an attraction for people to want to go there. And they were looking and they were talking to him after the presentation. Yeah. It was hard for him to get out of that room.
Sean was a great, David, Sean was a great partner. Him and I spent a lot of time over the past 4 years side by side, drafting the bylaw that you see today. And we've been getting a lot of inquiries. Sean's been doing a great job presenting from the administrative point of view, and even other municipalities, other mayors, councillors. I personally received calls from, east and west and south and north of us, asking, oh, how's this working? What's this not doing? And just giving our feedback, because people are seeing the need for regulation most definitely is there.
Well, I'm going to say to you both that one of the things that some municipalities have done is included their CAO or staff on this show. So maybe in the fall we can bring him in, your CAO in, and have that conversation and let him speak, because I know that short-term accommodations are in a big issue on Sound, Georgian Bluffs. I'm sure they are in Meaford. Right across the Bruce, into Bruce County. So let's share the wealth.
Absolutely.
Have in mind.
Excellent idea.
Just keep that in mind for the future. But I was going to ask you too. Do you think that this is the way that municipalities are learn, is that they share this kind of knowledge? Because what I want to get at is how does this new learning happen? It sounds like what you do is you get together, you listen to a good speaker, and okay, maybe we can try something else. Is that how it actually works?
Any good idea is shared, most definitely. And our CAO, Sean Everett's been doing a great job, as well as the mayor and myself, and just spreading the word on what we've been doing. Only because there's always a way to build a better mousetrap, but we've been working on this. We have 15, 16 years of history in it being licensed. That's unprecedented. So being a pioneer of the 444 municipalities in Ontario goes quite a long way. So, sometimes it's as simple as, you a couple of towns you mentioned, I've gotten calls, the mayor's gotten calls. Oh, what are you doing here? Everybody's unique. Something did come up at Grey County when they said, should we look at a regional approach? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. These type of bylaws to me are very local specific, because what works in some, there's maybe 7 out of 10 things can be overlapped, but there's those finite details that are unique to our town, which may be unique to Meaford or to Tiny Township in Simcoe, whatever the case may be, or Prince Edward County, as the mayor said. So we really have to be at the grassroots level, I think. Sharing the information, absolutely. But then their bylaws are going to, and their administration people are going to know what's going to work for them at that level. And that, that leads into, we I don't know if you guys talked about it before, but that leads into municipal accommodation tax and how that will affect the short-term accommodation as well as the hotel industry. So there's so many, once you start building a set of rules, you see that you can continue that forward with different avenues and aspects as it relates to those bylaws.
I also wanted to point out that, and then you rightly point out, Peter, that there may be a countywide solution, but perhaps it is best left to the individual municipalities. The province has basically said, you take care of it.
Yeah.
We'll give you whatever the tools that you might need, the frameworks that you might need, or at least give you advice. But it's a local issue. It's not although it's across the province, it's local solutions for local problems, it sounds like.
Right, because
go ahead,
sorry.
Nick.
I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely, because every municipality is going to have its unique attributes. But certainly, in general, we all look to collaborate and to share best practices and precedents that have been set. Whenever we're looking at something new in terms of our bylaws, we're looking around, we're scanning other municipalities. Who else has been out there doing it? What can we learn from it? It's much easier to do that than to start with a complete blank page. So if we've muddied our feet getting through some glitches and figuring things out, it serves all of us across Ontario when we can share it and say, this worked for us. You'll have to tweak it to make sure that it works for you, but at least you've got a starting point.
Sure. Well, speaking of pioneering, let's move on to what's called the Campus of Care, which is, well, tell me about it.
Excellent. Well, and yes, so just to catch people up, when we're talking about a campus of care, we do have some surplus lands that are within the town's possession, and we are ready to be able to work with a developer and with a long-term care provider in order to be able to create a full campus of care. So when we say that, we're talking about much more than a long-term care facility with 160 beds. We're talking about giving seniors the option to stay within their community where their social network is, to be able to not have to go far from their friends or their family that are here, and to be able to go into retirement living and then eventually progress to long-term care when their needs are there. But a key part of those two components of a campus of care is that, as we all know, attainable housing is definitely in crisis point across our county. And in particular, in order for us to be able to attract the healthcare staff that we need to be able to facilitate 160 new long-term care beds, and as well as assistance in retirement living, we need to provide them with some options about where they might live too. So that's why our campus of care includes attainable housing for the healthcare workforce, labor force that will need to support it. We have been working, there was one proponent that made it through the process when we put out the proposals, and it's SkyDev as the developer and People's Care as the long-term care provider. And as we know, they are operating right next door in Meaford. So, and SkyDev has a reputation here. Yes, and Owen Sound as well. So they already know that this region, and that's why they're interested to do it here. I like to think of that campus of care as a micro community. It will be within reach of active transportation as well as vehicle transportation to the rest of our town of Thornbury, which is one of our population centricities here in the town of Blue Mountains. But at the same time, right there, we want to make sure that there are daycare places, because if we're going to have healthcare professionals working there, they will need access to that. So you can imagine, rather than being an isolated long-term care facility somewhere, you'll be able to sit out on your terrace as a long-term care resident and be able to hear children's laughter and see kids playing along a sidewalk that goes through the campus. So we truly do want to build it as a place for all ages and stages, and bring in community partners that are able to come and do programming and things like that too. So that's part of the pioneer work, but maybe you want to talk about the CHIA.
Well, I was just going to mention that it's interesting you mentioned the housing for workers, because 25 years ago, I was talking to a municipal planner who was talking about, was say, a beach area in particular, but his study included all the way across Collingwood Blue Mountains. And he said the biggest issue that is going to be facing this whole community right across Simcoe and Grey is going to be worker accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yep.
not as if this hasn't been it isn't a known issue, but you're doing something about it, which is the biggest part.
And I think part of it is you're right. That was 25 years ago already. That was on the radar. And what's happened since too is, in the early days when Peter and I were first on council, the conversations were often about our service industry because we have a very embedded tourism culture, for example, here. And in order to be able to have your favorite restaurants open 7 days a week, you need staff for that. But it became quite apparent in these last 5 years or so that we've been working together that it's gone far beyond just the service providers as well, right to young doctors who are coming out of college with a student debt load. They maybe have a spouse who has to relocate now, so they're going to have to give up that source of income until that spouse can be reestablished elsewhere. They are coming up here and they're looking and they're hearing that we're in desperate need of more family physicians, and they say, we love everything about this place, but we cannot afford to live here. So it's right across the spectrum. I want to get past that idea that it's only about service staff.
Agreed, because I'm hearing the same thing around physician recruitment, which is a great segue into one of the things I noticed from your most recent council meeting is you're requesting 4 delegations at AMO with various cabinet ministers, and one of them is going to be discussing physician recruitment. Don't tell me you don't have enough doctors either. I mean, isn't Blue Mountain enough of an attraction?
Yes.
My tongue in the cheek.
And I don't know, Peter, do you want to start talking about that and I'll add in?
Yeah, absolutely. The mayor has done a good job with a couple of the initial conferences and getting in front of the provincial counterparts to let them know what we need here. Physician recruitment, David, as much as the Blue Mountains is beautiful as many areas in Grey County, we literally have doctors who have gone to school for all this time with all the initials in front and behind their names saying, I love this. They go for a kayak on the Beaver River. This is fantastic. I love rural medicine. But I can't afford to live here. When you hear that from somebody that's a professional, that really wakes you up if you weren't awake already in regards to housing. So by getting in front of these ministers, letting them know what they can do to help, similar to the long-term care community that the mayor just spoke about, the same thing has to happen for the service worker, from the lifty to the mountain to the doctor that's going to treat the person, unfortunately, to twist their ankle falling down the mountain. That or the person that lives in Lower Bay that has a bum knee from golfing, whatever the case may be, we need to have that housing available for all. And when we can't do that across the spectrum, that's a need. It's 2023, and we're seeing that people, even within our own town, cannot live within the town. We need to correct that. We need to become a community that can sustain its workers as well as its residents, as well as its visitors.
Mm-hmm. And there is a regional balance to that as well. We are proud members of the South Georgian Bay Mayors and CAOs Forum. So it's 6 municipalities, 3 in Grey County, 3 in Simcoe County. We all share the similar concerns and want to be able to problem solve on a regional level. We don't have to own all the solutions. If we can get on a regional scale a match between available mixed variety of housing to meet those needs, and at the same time, now maybe somebody doesn't have to drive into Collingwood to go see a family physician, they can now reassess themselves over in the Blue Mountains. That's a great win, but we don't need to recognize those municipal boundaries. If people, those of us that are attached to doctors who are 2 hours or 3 hours away because they're in wherever we might have lived before, we'd be more than happy to only have to go as far as the neighboring municipality. That said, I think it has to be balanced on a shared responsibility. So the town of Blue Mountains, yes, we are full of job opportunities. There's no doubt about that. 2.5 million visitors a year will provide lots of opportunities here. But at the same time, we can't then just shake our hand, wash our hands of it and say, well, let's let the neighboring municipalities sort out the housing. We have to own that. And whether or not it ends up being built right here or built next door, we have to be an active participant in that solution.
One of the things that certainly is an issue in Owen Sound around physician recruitment is that because it's a city, it doesn't qualify for the rural medicine subsidies. Is Town of Blue Mountains considered rural by the province for subsidies for medical medical service?
Yeah, we do. So we benefit from the ROMP program, which is the Rural Ontario Medical the program in which student doctors can start to sample out the areas, and that's very closely related to the Collingwood Hospital because the program of Ontario just happens to be operating out of there. So we do have a different profile than the city of Owen Sound would have. That said, we did have to petition to the province to recognize that the town of Collingwood was in as high a need of physicians as the neighboring municipalities, because it was out of the 6 municipalities, they weren't recognizing that. They thought they were okay there. And we had to say, no, you have to relook at the data here and understand that they have a need as well. Because, as I said, a lot of people are filtering in, they're crossing a border, and we have to be able to shake that out and be able to assist. So we are a little bit different than what struggles you may be with in Owen Sound. Problem is, as Peter said, everybody wants to come here, but they just can't.
And I think that's a universal problem. I've heard the same thing said here. I've heard the same thing said in other parts of Grey and Bruce, that it's a serious issue. And it's interesting that once again, we don't worry about the boundaries. The province does. It seems. Patients don't worry about seeing a doctor in Collingwood if they're in Grey County. Just doesn't matter, or wherever. But anyway, it's an interesting and ongoing issue. I am quite sure that there will be many conversations that will happen at AMO in August around physician recruitment. That's to be absolutely certain. Now, one of the things that I just wanted to get back to is that going back to the campus of care, is part of the funding part of federal funding as well? That it's a federal. Is there any federal dollars in that? Because one of the things that I saw in the summary I saw was that's part of a housing accelerator money. That's federal, is it not?
Yeah, it's. I wish there were money attached to it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
but there isn't. The CHIA, as people are starting to call it, is the Community Housing and Infrastructure Accelerator Program, and it is an alternate universe to the Ministry zoning orders, the MZOs. So this is a brand new product that the province is putting out to help expedite when there are community programs such as building more long-term care beds, can go through a process with the province to accelerate the approval process. So they did. We had started down the road last year in applying for an MZO in order to be able to accommodate all of the needs that we would have to pack into that campus of care. And the province came back and said, well, we're going to introduce this new program, and we need you to go through this. So we are, in fact, the pioneer. We are the first pilot project to go through it, and it is to grant us the ability to build those 160 beds. So this, when the announcement came out April 3rd, that was the word we were waiting for from the province, because up until then they were talking about giving us 160 beds, but until they granted us this CHIA, we didn't actually have them. So we now do have them, and the CHIAs can have conditions attached to them, but there actually are no conditions attached to this one. They really like the plan. We will have to build up in stories, which is why we had to look at going for for permission from the province in order to be able to accommodate all of the needs that we've talked about earlier. And the province had a look at that and said that is the direction that we want to go to provide more options for seniors to age in place.
So don't tell me there will be 5 6-story buildings in the town of Blue Mountains now, or or going up to 10 or 20.
No, not 10 or 20, but going up to 5, we're going to have to look that way. We actually do have 5-story buildings already in the town of Blue Mountains, just not as predominantly as you might be. There's one just down the hill from me here in the town hall.
Yeah, everybody forgets about Bay Street, built a long time ago with 5 stories, and then you look into the village core. We don't want to become a city of skyscrapers. You're not going to see that, David. But a matter of economics, sometimes you have to look at what's what, keeping in mind that the long-term care facility is one building out of a whole campus, a whole community, which as we talk about Lower Bay, Ravenna, Craigleith as different communities, I guarantee you, this will have its own name when it's built, and it will all be integrated into the community fabric with with keeping and being cognizant of keeping it back from the road and spreading out the buildings and making sure that we can accommodate everything that's needed to be accommodated without losing the main fabric and theme of the town of Blue Mountains. That's been the mayor's been working on this file for a long time. She was probably one of the first people on it, so she knows it better than anybody back in her councillor days. But this community, once it moves forward, I think will be an integral part of the community, not just for what it offers, but how it looks. And I'm fairly confident that we'll be fine. And and I think the province sees that too. I believe if we were the first CHIA that was ever granted under this new program, as the mayor said. So that's a good acknowledgement to how confident the province is that we can make this happen and make it work for all the residents around us.
Well, I look forward to an update on that when we come back in the fall, because this is like you say, it's pioneering. It's new stuff. So, town of Blue Mountains seems to be right out on the cutting edge, isn't it?
We're doing what we can.
Yeah, we're just trying to stay ahead of that that inherited title of being the second fastest growing municipality in Canada.
Oh, there are lots of good titles that municipalities have, that's for sure. Now, that's hey, isn't there a car rental firm that says they were number 2 and we try harder?
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway, I wanted to touch briefly on another one of the related to housing. Another one of the requests you're going to have for AMO to meet with one of the ministers about an attainable housing credit system and other incentives for attainable housing, and that's a very interesting concept. Tell us more about that.
You want to start off here?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor. Not every, especially when you look at the town of the Blue Mountains, east to west, bay southward, every time a developer comes forth, we say, what are you doing to help the attainable problem? And and realistically, sometimes if people still want, unfortunately, a 4,000 square foot house on a 2-acre lot at a golf club, so we're still going to have that. Will attainable housing fit into that model? Not always. That being said, the builders have been, in our conversations, quite receptive to saying, we will help with attainable housing. Tell us what to do. So in this instance, this is having this conversation at the provincial level, and the mayor will be leading that charge with our CAO, is if we can get in front of Minister Clark and his team and talk about maybe a credit system, saying if you build this many houses here, maybe when we do have a attainable housing facility, you can buy a floor in that building or whatever the case may be, to offset by building here at market rate to help offset the attainable level. So that in layman's terms, that's kind of what we're looking at, but I'll let the mayor continue because she'll be leading that charge.
Sure. So, Peter's right. We are starting to note a shift, and certainly back in 2018 when he and I were first starting, it was like we were putting on the table, what about attainable housing? But now we are starting to get examples of developers that are coming and saying, we're listening, but you need to help give us the tools or tell us how we can do this, because we know how to build houses, but we don't know how to handle this program of attainable housing. And when we're saying attainable housing, we're talking about labor force housing, and we've already talked about the range of mixture of housing options that you need to provide for the range of incomes that are within our labor force. So that is certainly a shift that we're starting to notice, and it's good to see. The concept is as Peter said, I mean, it's not that we're going to stop building what is it? Our average square foot home that's now built is 3,100 square feet. So there's still going to be a need. Developers will still say, I have a market that I want to meet. But if I'm not going to be actually building units that are going to be classified or eligible to move into a program of attainable housing, then the credit system is suggesting, okay, then you contribute some credit, so that if there's another developer out there that says, you know what, I can build more than my 20% quota or my 20% mark, I could actually build a development where 50% would be under attainable, and then that developer would then benefit from the credits coming from another developer. So that's the idea, is that then in the end the community benefits because we get the number of units that we need, but at the same time they're not necessarily going to be evenly distributed to all of the developments that are going to be coming.
What it sounds like is you have actually started to address the balance between attainable, affordable, and market rate, and that's really the challenge that everyone is facing. So it'll be, and this will also take several years, I'm sure, to roll out. Maybe just in time for the next election. Oops, that's
Yeah, hopefully we'll have heads in beds by 2026. But no, you're right, David. And when I was talking to a developer, an exec from Tridel the other day, and they said, when we're building in Toronto, when we're putting up a 28-story tower and we need to sprinkle in this many amount of units to meet either the need of the council or the provincial policy statement, we can sprinkle those in throughout the building. When we're building, a state, well, not us, but when a developer wants to build some estate houses on a golf course, you can't sprinkle those in. So this will actually help tie the market rate builder with the attainable builder. And I like to use the word attainable over affordable, only because affordable to me gets into something at the local level, that's more of a regional, provincial, federal initiative, I think. But at the attainable, there's nothing wrong with a below 20% below market rate, trying to adhere to the provincial policy statement of 20% of the new build should be that. I think we can do that by marrying the two, whether it's through the development itself or an adjacent development that somebody else is building that they're going to contribute financially towards. And I'm hopeful that the province will be receptive of that. I think they will be. Like I said, the mayor is right on top of this one, and I think that's something that the province will help even guide developers as they move forward with hopefully some tooling of the language through their planning.
And at this point, I'm going to have to stop because we've got to take a break, and we're going to come back because, we got a lot more to talk about. I'm David Shearman. This is Politically Speaking, and yes, we'll be right back.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
You're watching Rogers TV.
I don't care what the law is. I will never be a slave. That word, I hate it. It rests on my tongue like rot.
Peter, how does it feel to get paid for your work?
There are rumors freedom's coming for us all.
Freedom, that's all I want.
Chloe, careful. Real men would rather sell you across the river to America than let you go free.
Then I'll run.
I've run before. Maybe this time for good.
No! Just get her into a boat. No!
Chloe, no!
Word of of Chloe Cooley's resistance led to Canada's first legislation limiting slavery. After 200 years, slavery was abolished in Canada in 1834.
Are you the type who would keep going or stop? It's not easy to stop when you have an addiction. Legalizing cannabis won't stop addiction. It trivializes its consumption. Let's be vigilant. If you need help, visit portage.ca.
Hi, and welcome back to Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman. My guests are Mayor Andrea Matrosovs and Deputy Mayor Peter Bordignon of the town of the Blue Mountains. Got to get the full name in there. It's the town of the Blue Mountains. Two does. Just to make sure, just to make it emphatic. It's the. Anyway, Andrea, Peter, good to have you back again. Now, we were talking about housing, and that kind of thing. But there was an interesting thing that popped up on your council agenda recently. And this is one of those other things you want to talk to the minister about. And that's you've got something called special agricultural land. And it's a zoning problem? And let's talk about that. What's that all about?
Yeah, specialty agriculture is, in fact, a very specific zoning that comes down from the province. And it's recognizing that there are certain climates, certain soil compositions, certain locations in which agriculture is suited. And in our particular case, the specialty ag is for the orchard industry. So the fruit growing, not just apples, but fruit growing in general has had a long tradition in this area. And it does, for those who are less familiar with the town of Blue Mountains, what was the former Collingwood Township amalgamated with the town of Thornbury. In both cases, there was an existence of apple growing. It happens between the shore and at the base of the escarpment. So up where I live, for example, on the top of the escarpment, that's not specialty agriculture, although I do have 24 traditional heritage apple trees on my property, but the real growth is down here. And that does overlap very much so with what is now our settlement areas where we've been building our populations. And I actually have a document, thanks to the late Councillor Jim Urim, who at the time was a planner when this discussion topic about specialty agriculture lands being designated with this status came about. And I think it's dated 1971. And it shows how the apple orchard industry was overlapping into what was being called then planning area, and how the planning area is what became our settlement areas of the Thornbury, the Thornbury boundaries. So the predicament that we have in this day and age then is we have to reassess that. That was now 50 some years ago. So we need to say what makes sense for the apple growing industry or the fruit growing industry now. There are some segments that are designated as specialty agriculture because they're conducive, the soil is good, the climate is good for them, but they're smaller pieces of land that made sense for apple growing back in the 1970s, but doesn't necessarily match the way in which things are done today. So it's a good idea to have a good look at it and to be able to work with the ministry and say what is making sense now, and use things like those historical documents that I've mentioned to delineate the line between where we develop, where there could be the next future attainable housing, for example, because it's close to an urban center, but at the same time, how we respect and protect what we need to keep doing, and that's growing food for people in Ontario.
And it's interesting you mentioned the agricultural techniques, because if you remember 50 years ago, apple trees were tall, they spread out. But there's been a significant intensification of fruit cultivation. I mean, I recall it 20 years ago when it started, because I had a family member who was involved in the industry, and he said, he was telling me about it. He said, this is the way it's going to be. There is an intensification. It lowers labor costs because your fruit is lower to the ground, so you don't need as much land, perhaps. And this, as a result, you got to clean up the zoning.
So yeah, exactly. Yes, whether or not we need them spread across the way in which they were, I know that sometimes people get a little nervous when they hear the term intensification, but it's about efficiency. You're right, and the shape of apple trees, which looks much more like vineyards in this day and age,
Yes.
is because they've realized that that's actually the best way that they could do the cultivation and the harvesting. So that said, our established growers here in this area are using acres and acres and acres. So something that's a smaller piece that might have been overlapping into what was known as a planning area. That 1971 document was saying not that those areas wouldn't eventually become development, but maybe there's a priority, which ones you should do first and second and third. So it's, I think it would be a good refresh with the province, with the Ministry of Agriculture, to be able to say what makes sense to make sure that we continue to provide food for Ontarians, but at the same time, we look at the dynamics around our settlement areas.
Sure. And obviously there will be consultation with the industry and with agriculture and with the community and everything. So it's not as if this is something that's going to happen tomorrow.
Right, exactly,
Right.
because there'd be a lot of stakeholder input but it is actually from some of those stakeholders in that industry that we're hearing, I would never want to establish an orchard on that piece of property because it's X, Y, or Z. It's, the location is too close to residential or it's too small for the kind of production that I do. Our chair of our agricultural advisory committee is Councillor Gail Ardell, and she is actually an active apple grower. So, we have in-house, we have the expertise to be able to work and to be able to reach out to the larger Apple Growers Association to be able to say, Fruit Growers Association, because we do have pears and others as well, to be able to say, tell us what works, what makes sense, and what perhaps does not any longer make sense.
Sure.
And as we tend to move forward, we tread very lightly when it comes to agriculture. It's the cornerstone of the community. It's not just historically, but continuing operations. So when something like specialty ag is involved in it is at the provincial level, it's just a matter of opportunity to discuss what 2023 forward looks like compared to 1971 and before and up to this point. So the mayor said it best by a lot of this has come from the ag community themselves. We work very closely with our agricultural community, and what they tell us is where we take some of our marching orders from, or at least thoughts to move forward with, and that's really the genesis of this meeting that will be coming up this summer.
Sure. Now, because we've covered all the four issues that you want to raise, these are not assured because you've just made the requests. Mm-hmm. You'll have to wait and see, to use a fishing analogy, who bites.
Yeah.
Yes, and certainly, but to be able to sit at the table with the minister and or his or her staff, to be able to go right there, be able to put the idea in the plate is very helpful. And that's the reason why we're always very active in submitting our delegation applications. You're right, we don't necessarily get them all, but we actually have a pretty high ratio. we do quite well on that. And interestingly, one of the topics that we've had around our mayors and CAOs South Georgian Bay Forum is about actually putting in for a delegation together. So we can say to the ministry, we'd like to talk to you about this issue, attainable housing, doctor retention, et cetera. And we are 6 municipalities that want to talk to you about this. And I think that will hit the radar very well with the province, because they've been interested when I just recently chatted briefly with Minister Clark and saying, we want to have you up here for a visit because we can show you around 6 municipalities in one day and be able to problem solve together. So I think that resonates.
That's another thing, David, that the mayor just touched on, is that we've been very fortunate with our communications with Queen's Park by having ministers here, showing them around. We've anywhere from tourism to transportation to housing to red tape reduction. We've been able to, for one thing, we're a beautiful community, so it's not hard to get them to come here. But in their busy schedule, once they're here, we hit the ground running with this is what's happening here. And sometimes it involves neighboring municipalities. Sometimes it's a matter of standing on the side of Highway 26 and showing them what we're talking about. You know, the cider growers, with the beer growers get together and say, did you know cider is taxed differently than beer? Sometimes the minister's own staff doesn't even know that. And those are little things that when they're sitting there enjoying a local cider, they could appreciate the concept of what we're talking about. And that goes a long way. We've been quite successful in getting visits here, even here, boots on the ground. And that's gone a long way to help us ingratiate ourselves with Queen's Park.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And, you know,
a good cider doesn't hurt either.
Absolutely. That's what
and
I enjoy doing the tours. The mayor puts me in charge of that one.
Sure.
it doesn't actually just stop with the politicians coming from Queen's Park to visit as well. A good example about working regionally is transportation. So you can imagine when we have our county boundary right here to the east of us, as well as municipalities, how that can divide lines when the province carves up on a map who's going to be responsible for what. And in transportation, that was definitely the case. The CAO, Everett, who was able to organize a staff visit of both of the zones, the Ministry of Transportation zones, the ones that the one that we're part of, and then the one that Collingwood's part of, and be able to take them on a tour and say, here, let's try to get across Highway 26. You'll see the challenges we have for active transportation. And it was the first time that those staff people were actually on the same bus, in the same room, talking to each other, because they've been focused on their own zones. And yet that makes such a difference to us with that dividing line.
Absolutely. But this is a continual issue in this part of the country. I know it is. It's absolutely true. But which also relates to, actually, I made a mistake. There was one other issue I wanted to touch on about in your requests for AMO, and that was the management of the parks in the provincial parks in the Blue Mountains area. What's that about?
Well, we have a succession here in the town of Blue Mountains. We actually have 4 different parcels that are actually provincial land. So we people, in particular, people who are out towards the Collingwood side of our town, are quite interested in the Pretty River Parkway and the Pretty River Park and that provincial land. I live very close to the Duncan Caves and also Metcalf Rock, which is another. Metcalf Rock is provincial crown land, and the Bruce Trail runs through it. So there are those 3 properties, and also the Colpore Uplands is also a large contingency of crown land. It's popular year round, whether it's cross-country skiing in the winter or hiking in the summer. People want to be able to use that too. So we have an intricate system, like where, for example, we might have a parking lot that's sitting on crown land, but then, you know, who's going to end up taking the responsibility of clearing the snow, that kind of thing. We have to work together with the province on those. And certainly what was exasperated during COVID is we realized that the access to that, of people driving to these trailhead locations and wanting to access that we were going to be very challenged with our parking. We already were pre-COVID. You know, Metcalf Rock is one example where there is constant not legal parking down the roadside because the parking lot gets filled. So the town wants to expand the parking lot, but it's provincial land. We have to work with province on that. We don't get to make those decisions. So we have had some progress, and there will be, the next time we meet, I'll be able to update on some of the things that have been developing, starting with the Pretty River Park, and then we'll keep that dialogue going, because we have to be able to, if you can solve a problem one place, you have to keep working on the other access points as well, because all of those areas could use expanded parking, and we have to work with province on that.
I'll tell you right now, there'll be a lot of Bruce Trail users who will be exceedingly happy about increasing the parking for Bruce Trail access through town of Blue Mountains, because that's one of the things I see in Bruce Trail discussion groups is people will say, I got a parking ticket, and yeah, you were parking in the wrong spot.
Yeah, and it's about safety.
It's serious. It is about safety. It's also about access to farmers' fields. Because people realize if you block access to a hayfield, that farmer can't get on and get there and make their money, because that hay is part of their farming.
That's right. We want safety for both of the trail users as well as people who are living there, as well as people that need to get through there as well. So some of it is looking at the trail access points and working with the Bruce Trail Conservancy to say maybe there's a better access, a safer access point. How can we align that or rearrange that so that people don't have to do something precarious in order to hit that trailhead? But at the same time, it's absolutely imperative that the rules are followed about where you can and cannot park on the road. When an EMS service, when a fire truck or an ambulance cannot get through to a resident, we have a problem. So we have to keep working on it until we can solve the problems where people can have a place to go or be able to know where to go next if it's full. And that's actually ties into our Beaver Valley tourism initiative that's coming out of Grey County, where we're going to be working with our sister municipality, Grey Highlands, as well as making sure that Meaford's involved as well, to be able to say, hey, we've got great things for tourism, like the apple industry. We want to be able to bring people to see what it is that we do and grow here, and all the recreational facilities. So how do we work all that together so it's really easy for somebody to call up an app or look at a map and go, oh, well, my favorite spot, the parking lot's full. Oh, but look, only 2 kilometers away, there's another thing I can go do.
Sure. Well, we've got about 10 minutes or so left, but I wanted to touch on a piece of history, if I can call it that. And there was a discussion at council, I gather, about and a representation made about your Maintaining the Line Fences Act, which is a piece of legislation that goes back to the 1840s. And past Grey County Warden Duncan McKinley, I gather, addressed the issue. What's that all about?
Well, as you know, the Fence Viewers Act is probably the oldest piece of legislation you can find written. And, Mr. McKinley did a great job, and both from his farmer point of view, as well as his regional and municipal governance point of view, on why it's important to keep that. And he likened the analogy saying, just because the police aren't giving a lot of seatbelt tickets anymore doesn't mean the law doesn't need to be there. And that made me smile when he said that, because what he means is, okay, we've had, I think the mayor can correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's been one in the past 7 years, but these are impartial, friendly resolutions to these problems, and where that you get together, and like you said, it's a simple matter of maybe somebody's tractors go here, the property line is in the wrong spot, and let's keep that line viewer, let's convene that committee if need be, let's stay within those laws and not opt out of it. And by having it there goes a long way for peace of mind as well as resolution, because the resolution in this day and age is far less than it needed to be 100 years ago. But by having it in place, continues to keep continuity and peace. And Duncan McKinley put that across very eloquently, and did a great job explaining it to why that piece of legislation needs to stay active. And I'm really glad that we did.
Mm-hmm. Now, to be clear, it only will be applied to rural parts of the town. Is that correct?
That was Duncan McKinley's suggestion, is that because we had floated the idea, do we need this at all, or should we do it in parcels? And so that was the recommendation that we heard, with his background, speaking as a public member, but with that kind of background, to be able to say, look, a good solution might be keep it in the rural areas. If you want to do something differently in the urban areas, that's fine. Let people do other resolution, resolve their issues in other mechanisms. But the Line Fences Act makes a lot of sense for the rural and the agricultural territory that we have.
Yeah, we found it a great medium. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and urban areas are more likely to have a survey done, or at least a survey, a relative, that is on record. Surveys in rural areas may or may not be up to date. And I've come across some real doozies over the years, but particularly involving cemeteries. But the point is that it's a way of resolving important issues peacefully.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So it sounds like the how shall I say it? There will be continuity in the town of Blue Mountains.
Absolutely. And one other thing we did just this past council meeting was we had talked, I believe, last time, David, in regards to committees and moving forward with things like that. And when we first did the committees, we thought it'd be a great idea for public engagement, public involvement, and we grew to 13 committees, and we almost created a fifth level of government. So what we did is we suspended those committees about 6 months before the last election, and then we took another hard look at them, saying what is needed. Similar to the fence viewers, whether sustainability, agriculture, economic development, philanthropy. So we've taken now a look at all those for continuity purposes and change the terms of reference. Do we need to meet once a month? Can we meet quarterly? Whatever the case may be. Do we need 15 public members, or can we get away with 9 public members? So that's another thing that we've done in relation, similar to the fence viewers, by having different committees coming forth and staying true to the continuity of what we're trying to achieve. And we just appointed, I believe, most of the committees, the public members, we ratified that at Monday's council meeting.
Mm-hmm. And those are our advisory committees of council. So they don't make decisions, but they do give council advice on how to make the best decision that council can make. So those are vital. But what we've realized that in some cases the job was completed. So the Sustainability Advisory Committee, we struck that up in 2018 to look at our previous sustainable path and then work on a process with the public and with staff and with council together to create the integrated community sustainability plan. The project was completed. We completed that. We published it out in late 2022. So that committee, we did not restrike for this round. It doesn't mean, though, that the community input is not going to continue, because in that particular example, what makes more sense are things like task forces, where it's project-based, right, where if we want to work on bold action number 16, for example, we can call the right people in from the community to give us that kind of advice. And that helps with volunteerism, because in some cases, people would like to provide input, but they cannot commit to a 4-year-long monthly meeting schedule. Like Peter said, in some cases, it was, saying how often do we really need to meet, that kind of thing. But I know from my community background and volunteer background that what really resonates with people is when they know there's a start and a finish date. Mm-hmm. They say, I can put the 110% in to get this topic, to contribute to this topic, because I know about it and it's important to the community, but I got to know that I can do that 110% and then leave it with the job accomplished.
Sure. And actually, governance review for anybody is a very important factor, so that every few years you look at your purposes, you look at your priorities, you look at your strategic plan, if you have one, mm-hmm, and figure out what works and what doesn't. And it sounds like that's what the town of Blue Mountains is doing.
We're going through that strategy right now. It's going to be a very interesting year. The CIOs between the strat plan, as well as a few other plans that we're putting forth with measurable goalposts. As the mayor said, that's what people want to see. And the things we're putting into place right now will have a start and a finish time, as well as a measurable goalpost to reflect against that.
And at that point, I got to say, it's time. Thank you both for being a part of Politically Speak today. Mayor Andrea Matrosovs and Deputy Mayor Peter Bordignon. And it's been great to have you. Look forward to having you back in the fall when we can continue this conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. And thank you. And we look forward to bringing on CAO Everett with us in the next one.
Great.
Most
and
definitely.
Thank you, friends, for being a part of Politically Speaking. I'm David Shearman, and yes, we will talk again.
Rogers TV Viewer Response Line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
He's, taking up some space, and just a perfect shot.
And we got a tie ball game. Nice low shot, right around.
Calling all journalism students, Omni Television is once again awarding scholarships to qualified students pursuing a career in third language journalism.
Having this opportunity to envision what